Okay, welcome everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us for the Austin Young Chambers Lead Series, Mindful Leadership in a Shifting World today. We are so glad that you can take part in today's conversation with the incredible Dr. Colette Pierce-Burnette, President of Huston-Tillotson University and the 2022 Austinite of the Year. My name is Alyssia Palacios-Woods, and I'm the President and CEO of the Austin Young Chamber. The Young Chamber helps our business community thrive by supporting you, the young professionals in our region, whether you're an entrepreneur, a manager, or an early career professional. We align resources and programs to create opportunities to support your success here in Central Texas. Young professionals are the largest and most diverse generation in the U.S. labor workforce, so we know the work that we do is important to shape the future of our region and our nation. We run many programs throughout the year that promote entrepreneurship, civic engagement, networking, community growth, and of course, professional development like today's webinar. We encourage you to hop on our website at austinyc.org to learn more and become a member and engage with us throughout the year. Just a few notes before we begin today's presentation. This is a live recorded webinar, and a link to watch today's presentation will be made available to you post-event. Today is designed to be an interactive Q&A format. I will be asking some prepared questions of Dr. Pierce-Burnette, and I encourage you to add any questions you may have into the chat so that I can ask them on your behalf toward the end of the program. Please go ahead and do that. So with that, it is now my pleasure to introduce the amazing Dr. Colette Pierce-Burnette. Dr. Colette Pierce-Burnette serves as the President and CEO of Huston-Tillotson University, making strides to create change in equity and education. She is the first female president of the merged Huston-Tillotson University and only the second female president in the institution's 140-year history. She serves on many boards and committees, including our friends at the Greater Austin Area Black Chamber, colleges and universities, Austin Community Foundation, DISCO, Texas Methodist Foundation, Frontier Bank, Greater Austin Urban League, Big Brothers Big Sisters of Central Texas Advisory Council, Urban Roots Advisory Council, and Waterloo Greenway Board. Quite a lot there. She's a busy lady. A native of Cleveland, Ohio, Dr. Pierce-Burnette received her high school diploma from John F. Kennedy High School, a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from the Ohio State University, and a Master of Science in Administration from Georgia College. She is a graduate of the Harvard Graduate School of Education's Management Development Program and received her EDD in Higher Education Administration from the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Pierce-Burnette is married to retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Daryl Burnette, and they have two children, Daryl II of Rockville, Maryland, and Dana of Los Angeles, California. Dr. Pierce-Burnette, we are all huge fans of your work and all that you stand for, and it is truly an honor to have you join us today. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited about today's conversation.
I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be welcomed back. I must not have said anything terrible the first time we were together. So I'm happy to be here.
I missed that conversation, so I'm excited to have a repeat and to ask some very important questions that I think are on a lot of our minds today. But as we begin, I first wanted to come back to something I mentioned at the very beginning. Congratulations on winning the Austin Chambers Austinite of the Year Award. Certainly most deserving, and we're so excited for you. Tell us just a little bit about what that particular leadership award means to you.
The award itself, I received the ceremony, I guess, or the event was, well, time is flying. I guess it was 2 weeks ago now, during South by Southwest EDU. And my family came for it. Well, my children were here because they were both working at South by Southwest with their particular jobs. And the event is something, I said this that evening, is something that I will cherish the rest of my life. I believe that if you follow your personal passions and you walk into your purpose, in my own life, it's, your assignment, if you will, where you're supposed to be at a certain time. So this has been my assignment, this role that I've played at the university and the role that I've played in the Central Texas and the Austin community in particular. So that award was almost like a checkbox where, well done, good and faithful servant. And even though my name is on that award, it's a whole crew of people. I have a tribe behind me that have helped me to accomplish the things that have been accomplished for Huston-Tillotson and the role I've played in the city. So it might be Colette Pierce Burnette on the award itself, but it's really an award, a recognition of something. And I think it makes I know it makes a statement about Austin and where we are in our evolution as a city. And I'm eternally grateful for that night. I felt probably more love than I have outside of my family than I have in my whole life. It was just a wonderful moment for me.
I love to hear that. I love to hear it. And I mean, you talk about kind of it being your tribe and a team and working together. And I think that's kind of what mindful leadership is. You know, you're leading teams and groups of people, and it's so important to have these conversations today. So let's dive into that. I believe mindful leadership is something that is so important in today's world as we face global, community, workplace, and personal challenges. And I want to start by creating kind of a common understanding of what mindful leadership is. Mindful leadership is an approach in which one very consciously cultivates the ability to be present and open-minded and compassionate in interactions with others in the workplace, outside of the workplace, and of course to foster clarity and focus for oneself. And really, we were chatting about this before, understanding and recognizing emotions and fears and how all that plays into what's happening within ourselves and with others. So, you know, to start us off, as the president of a university, a key leader in our community, a wife, a mother, no doubt being pulled in a million directions at once, how has mindful leadership practices really helped you in your professional, maybe even your personal journey, especially when you have so many big decisions to make?
So, you know, you're particularly as we've gone through several crises that we're all have lived through or are living through, your personal life and your professional life often intersect. For those of us who were able to work virtually, we saw it more than ever, where your work day conflates with your life day if you're working from home. So, so mindful leadership is leading in your life, I call it, and in your work life. And by definition, the being present, the open-minded, and the compassionate, those are things that I have, traits that I have had for my whole life. Those are just natural traits for me. I have to work at them, but they're natural. They're natural to me. And I think all of us have those kinds of things inside of us. And the key thing about mindful leadership is the being intentional about it, where you're consciously working on it. And we give these fancy names to things that help us to put them in a box. Like, are you a mindful leader? Do you have emotional intelligence? Are you present? Are you open-minded? So for me, in my own space, understanding that those two things often intersect, my personal life and my professional life, just because my job is so consuming. I'm never not the president. If I'm at a bar, or if I'm bowling, or if I'm in the HEB with my hat on because I didn't take time to do my hair, I'm still the president of HT, and people still recognize that. So you're always on in certain, the higher the taller your tree gets, so to speak. So I do work very hard at being present and to listen, to hear, as opposed, or to understand as opposed to responding. And it's a conscious thing you have to do, where you're not distracted with all the things that are going on around you. And open-mindedness, you have to be intentional about that, to stay open and to listen to people. And compassion is, I think, a learned skill and an innate skill, because I've met people that are just not compassionate about many things that they don't care about. So being compassionate is caring about things that you don't personally care about, and understanding, trying to understand someone else's perspective. And the thing that I would add to that you don't see in the formal definition of mindful leadership is extending grace to those around you and to yourself. When I make mistakes, I can beat myself up really bad, and that's not being mindful. Being mindful is accepting the mistake and the error that I made and learning from it, and then intentionally extending grace to myself, intentionally extending some compassion to myself, and staying open-minded and not shutting down so that I don't repeat the mistake and go forward. Recently, I was counseling one of my mentees that had conflict with his boss, and he just was closed in, like he didn't hear anything else she was saying, and it was not as bad as he thought it was once he opened up to kind of extend some grace to her and to himself and to work on the relationship. And relationships can be hard, but being mindful about things can help you to navigate them a little easier.
I couldn't agree more. And you're right, keeping it top of mind, and we know mindfulness isn't an easy road by any means. You have to work at it. It is work, and we all face challenges with it. You talked a little bit about how he's keeping it like top of mind and working towards it. What is challenging about mindful leadership to you, and maybe what's something that you do need to remind yourself constantly to do?
So, in higher education, shared governance is a thing where you have to, the governance of the institution, of course, I report to a board, but I have a faculty, I have staff, I have students, and they should have a voice in the governance of the institution. When we make decisions about the university, you should hear all voices. And that can be challenging in a crisis situation or in a fast-paced moving situation. If you're at an entity that's moving fast and you're in a team of people, you just want to make the decision and keep moving. Like, I just want to say, we're not going to do that. We're going to do that and keep moving. And that tramples over people. People don't feel heard. If you set up a plan and you don't engage other voices in the plan, then you're not mindful about it. You're not present. You're not open-minded. You're not being compassionate of what other people feel. It's probably going to fail if you need other people to buy into it and be engaged in it. Now, there are times where you as a leader have to make a decision. There's, the cut bait and fish. We can't keep measuring. We can't keep, we got to fish. So we got to jump out there and do what we need to do. And you as a leader innately know when those times are. But for long-term impacts, you have to slow the pace down without affecting the bottom line or affecting the challenges. A key example that leaders run into is diversifying your operation. There's a lot of pressure for us to be diverse, equitable, inclusive, and communities of belonging. The natural instinct is to make decisions quickly, hire people quickly, build out your infrastructure quickly, and because we have to stay on time and under budget. So that's the natural inclination of a leader. But a mindful leader figures out a pathway to slow things down, to think through our systems, to think through how we're processing this, to make sure that we are doing it in an equitable way, we are staying open-minded, we are learning in the process. And that's what an effective mindful leader does, without impacting the bottom line or without impacting the budget and all the other metrics that we talk about in being a leader and in processing in a business environment. But a mindful leader can accomplish those things effectively by doing those steps intentionally. And if you don't, it will come back and bite you, particularly in a plan. If you do a plan, the first example I was using, and people don't buy into it, you'll find yourself standing alone.
Great. And you definitely set us up for kind of the next part of our conversation, with slowing pace down, talking about long-term impact and not affecting the bottom line. I feel like as business leaders, we're ingrained to think about success in the realm of KPIs and ROIs, metrics we can track.
Mm-hmm.
But as leaders, we also have to pay attention to how what's happening around us affects our teams and our
Mm-hmm.
performance and even our health. We've all been through a lot lately. First, the global pandemic, the killing of George Floyd, the U.S. Capitol attack, Winter Storm Uri, the war in Ukraine, and just a few days ago, tornadoes in the
Mm-hmm.
Austin area. And it impacts us all in different ways, and it impacts our teams in ways that maybe we don't even realize. So how do you balance the need for progress and meeting goals and accountability with being mindful of what people are going through and creating that space to slow down?
So I have this strategy that I use on my campus with my cabinet. We rotate around the cabinet, and I've done this with other teams, but with my senior leadership, we rotate and every week we meet weekly, which every leader should have a meeting with their direct reports. Even if you're an entrepreneur, you should have set aside time to do a pulse check with people and to look people in the eyes and understand what's happening with them, because a good leader can read what's going on, read the room, as they say, which is emotional intelligence is the buzzword for it. But we have what we call a reflection every week, and we rotate it around so different people do the reflection. And then after we do the reflection, we do a response to the reflection. Each person takes a few minutes. It takes like the first 15 minutes. And people do all kinds of things. Like one of my members of my cabinet, he played a song and gave us the lyrics, and it was very meaningful. And we tie it into leadership. I did recently the story about the little boy who cuts the cocoon so that the butterfly can come out easier, but it destroys the butterfly because a part of the process is the struggle of coming out of the cocoon. And we tied that to leadership. And the reason that has been so effective for me is because it gives people the reflection back on the reflection. It tells you where people are without them being put on the spot to say what's happening in your life, because people generally use a reflection to say something that they've done positive recently, some grateful moment, or something that they're struggling with in their own leadership journey or their own work, their own walk in the space that we are. So I highly recommend that, because it gives people a chance to be human. And I have a very diverse cabinet. I have a Jewish member of my cabinet. I have white people, black people. I have all kind of people on my cabinet. So it's a very diverse cabinet, and it also gets us to learn about other people and other philosophies, if you will, other religions, other strategies, etc. So it brings the humanness, and you have to have humanity in the workplace. Life would be really easy if we didn't have people, and life would be really sad if we didn't have people. So we have to appreciate that we have humans in the workplace, and humans are flawed. So, and we're flawed. I mean, you as a leader have flaws. So recognizing and embracing that humanness, particularly, and giving people time to rest. Through COVID, it was a very, very stressful time. So people needed time to do that self-care, because people had people that they were losing. We all saw our mortality. There was something that we couldn't control. So why do you think that someone's going to leave that, 8:30, workday starts at 8:30, 9 o'clock, all that shuts down, and I'm just going to be focused on my job until 5:30, and then I'm turn it back on again? It doesn't work that way, and it never has. But in crisis situations, now we've been more in tune to that. Now the question is, will we learn from it, and will we become a better society as a result of it? That's yet to be seen.
For sure. We're certainly seeing more emerging trends around how people are aligning their values and where they want to spend their time with where they're working, and what their workplace can offer them, and flexibility, that's more in tune with what they want in their day to day. But I want to dig a little deeper into what you mentioned. I love the story about the reflections that you do with your cabinet members. And I feel like that also brings a level of trust into play. I know we've been virtual, and it's not often easy for people to share, to be that open. Have you had any roadblocks in that method that you've had to overcome? Are people unwilling to share, or how do you make that like an opportunity for people without forcing them into it?
So it's your option what you choose to share. So it's not optional to share something. Now you could share a Harvard Business Review case study and have people read it the day before and spend 5 minutes talking about it. Or you can share a personal poem, or like a lyric of a song, something from your own personal playlist. It says a lot about you when someone says, "What's your playlist?" Because we were all, the beautiful moment in that was the cabinet member that shared it is very stoic, very academic, and very stoic, odd sense of humor, etc. And he played like a Marvin Gaye song, and everybody was like, "Whoa!" But it showed a side of him that we could all appreciate. And he was very comfortable because that was his playlist. So you control your comfort level. How wide you want to open the door. And I am a very open door leader. I am also a very vulnerable leader. I show my vulnerability. That's a strength, and it also can be a weakness if it's not managed. Like, I don't cry all over the table. But when I'm upset about something and I have a personal feeling about something, I will say that I'm having a reaction and that that's a trigger for me. And the leader creates that environment to have that. I don't like to say safe space. I like to say brave space, because a safe space doesn't really protect people. But a brave space says, I can be brave in this moment and I'm safe in it. So you want your leadership style to be that people have this brave space around you to be able to be creative and innovative, because that does drive innovation and it does drive creativity, because people tend to be more open. Their brains becomes more opportunity for it to be a critical thinker and on. And it's okay to be human. That's part of mindful leadership. Like, it's okay to be human, since we are all human. And you do it within balance. Um, uh, we're not here to be friends, but we are here to respect each other. Here, meaning in the workspace, we are here to respect each other and to learn from each other and to support each other. And those reflections gives people opportunity to do that.
I love that. And, when we talk about these reflections, these opportunities, I think about really big companies, with so many people on their teams. And then I think about the small businesses where it's a little bit easier to connect one-on-one and have those personal relationships. How do you see this approach really scale, up to the big corporate level, but then also, shrink down to the small business level? What strategies do you see there?
So there are all, even at the large level, there are small teams within the big teams. Even the corporate CEO of a Fortune 10 company has a small team within the big team. So the small teams need to be permeable, where things, go in and out, so to speak, so that they're cross-functional. People, it's silos where but they're still permeable, going in and out. But the small teams start to set the culture of the bigger team.
Mhm.
So if I'm in a corporation, I'm in a team. And so, in my small sphere of influence, if you will, I'm going to do these things that I'm a leader of this team. And I am in another team, because it's just a series of teams. So, even though there's a big difference between a corporate culture and a small business culture, clearly, but there's still humans in those teams.
I love that.
So, I have a friend who's a leader of a very, very, very large organization, and he starts his town halls off with what he calls dad jokes. So he's now known for dad jokes, and they're clearly corny jokes. But people look forward to him starting it off. And he does it in his small team, where he said he could be a little more edgy in the small team than he can in the larger team, because you understand the personality. But that's his leadership style, to kind of loosen people up. So that's another strategy. I'm going to start off with a dad joke. He calls them his dad jokes. And they're actually, I think they're very funny. My sister thinks they're stupid. But I think they're very funny. But that's his style. And it's to get people to relax and to see him as a human being.
I love that. I know you've given us some really great examples, but I would love to hear just like maybe one or two more of some real life examples of what mindful leadership looks like in practice. Maybe something you've done or something others have done where they've used it effectively and just really were in tune with what was happening and kind of created a space for that.
So a very recent thing pops right into my head. To give context, I'm at a university and COVID comes, and we had to make a decision whether to close our residence halls and go fully online. The options were fully online, hybrid, or bring our students to campus. And this is back in March, April, May timeframe of 2020. So everybody can, just to give context. So my inclination, following my own moral compass, was to go fully online and close the residence halls. But I needed my team to lean into that. Now you have to think, the CFO does not want to close the residence halls because she's going to lose a lot of revenue. My academic affairs leadership does not want to go totally virtual because wasn't feeling totally prepared to be able to deliver instruction. My chief operating officer, student affairs, how are we going to maintain, if we can't touch students, how can we, you can't see them, how are we going to help navigate their lives? I had a lot of opinions. The faculty had a very strong opinion. The students had a very strong opinion, and not in concert. You have people who were all over the place. There was a lot of fear, a lot of unknown, and I found myself really working intentionally to be a mindful leader. Because in my own life, my mother is elderly. She was in a nursing home. There were nursing homes that had these breakouts. In my own life, things were going on. So I had to really focus myself on what was best for the students and listen to all these different opinions and drill it down to what we started calling scenarios. And every scenario had a financial impact to it, and it also had a person impact to it, quantifiable impact and a qualifiable impact. So getting all these voices, narrowing it down to, we started with 16 of them, and then we ended up with 4, with different financial models behind each of them. And we then made recommendations. It, came to a space with a small leadership in concert with my board, because I have a board, and we made the decision that was best for the universities and the students that it serves. Not the ideal, not the way we all wanted COVID to go away, but in that moment, I had to serve as the mindful leader, to be present, to stay open-minded, not fall into my own what I wanted to do, and also to be compassionate about what was happening in people's lives. There was a lot of trauma at that time, and this was pre-CARES Act money, so we didn't even know that we were going to get any assistance from the federal government to maintain. And we were committed not to do any furloughs or no layoffs, because I have a young staff. Many of them have young children, or they're the heads of their household, the sole breadwinner. So I had to make decisions about all of that going on. And it was a very, very stressful time. But in hindsight, I grew as a leader. The campus is stronger. It became more unified. Now, will we maintain that, after we, like post-COVID, when we all go back in our corners and huddle in our own spaces again? I hope not. I hope we really were put in a space to take this forward. But that's an example I could think of where mindful leadership really helped me to stay in the moment. And I came to campus every day with my chief operating officer and my provost every single day, because the campus never closed. We did end up going totally virtual because nature of the population we serve, and there were all these environmental factors we had to consider. But in hindsight, I grew as a leader in that. I can't say that enough. And it seemed like it was happening in slow motion, but it wasn't. It was happening at a very, very fast pace on a daily basis. And probably some of the toughest decisions, not probably, 3 of the hardest decisions I've made in my professional career have been in the last 3 years. And I make a lot of decisions, but those were the toughest. And I had to have a team to help me make them.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that you had some of the hardest decisions with what we all faced, and definitely the leadership growth that we all experienced. And I think it's great to kind of be able to look back now and see how that experience really helped us all kind of think about things differently.
One of
Um,
my, Very quickly before you go to the next question, one of my mentors told me that crises don't make leaders, it reveals the leader that you are. And I actually saw that in my own sphere of influence, use that term again. I saw the leadership style of my leaders on campus show itself. Um, and I'm sure the people who work for me would say the same thing about me. Some consistent and some inconsistent, where, wow, like that shows who you truly are. And not some bad, and some, like, people who I think would never have a strong opinion have very strong opinions, and some people who are totally opinionated were more deep, more back. So people react very who their authentic selves in the moments of fear, in the moments of crises.
yeah, 100%. And when you're faced with these big decisions, it's definitely not clear. I like to think of it as like a bunch of gray as you created these scenarios and you're trying to chart the best path forward, but
Hmm.
so much unknown. I feel like intuition and definitely empathy play a big role in that. And ultimately, as the leader of a university, you kind of, I mean, you want to bring people along with you, but ultimately, like, you have to make a
And
decision that
right,
upholds the best opportunity for,
and you're
you
not
know,
going to make everybody happy.
make everyone happy. So,
You
I
might not
mean,
make yourself happy. Okay.
yeah, you might not. So
Yeah.
how does intuition come into play with some of these big decisions when you know that not everybody's going to come along?
I'm a big believer in listening to your instincts. if you call it the lips, whatever you call it, the spirit that lives within, my instincts, my gut. People call it different things. It rarely leads you wrong when you're really listening. And the quieter you become, the more you hear. When you have a lot churning around you, you can't hear. So as a leader, sometimes I got to get my space. I take all the information in. I have to get my space so that I can hear my gut, hear my spirit of discernment. And we all have a moral compass where we know what's wrong, if that or what's wrong and what's right. And you're making decisions, particularly when it impacts people's lives, life and death moments in some cases, potential life and death in some cases. So you really have to follow your instincts. And you do. We all have that. Even when you're at a party and it starts going weird, you're like, oh, something's happening here, I need to go home. People get a little crazy, I need to go home. Or you have a friend and they give you all these signs that they're not good for you, they're a frenemy, and we kind of pretend like it's not happening. But your instincts, your moral compass, your gut, whatever you call it, is telling you this is not good or this is wonderful. It goes both ways, it cuts both ways. But we all have it. We choose sometimes not to listen to it. And then we always say, oh, something told me. People say that all the time, oh, something told me I shouldn't have done that. Or something told me I should have done that. You're something. We all have that something.
Absolutely. And you talked about quieting your mind and finding space. And recently, I heard someone mention that they set aside time in their day just for thinking, like to stop and to think, because there's a lot to consider. Do you get into meditation or do you set aside specific time to kind of have that reflection?
I'm a terrible self-care person. Terrible. I talk about it to other people. I encourage other people to do it. I'm like the person that stops smoking and then tells people all about what they're supposed to do, but I don't stop smoking. So I'm when it comes to self-care, I'm telling you what you should do, but I shouldn't do it. I do, and to give myself some grace, I'm a reader. I love to read. So I do over the weekend, when I can, because sometimes I don't get a weekend because there's always something happening that I need to attend or that I'm engaged in. But I do, as often as I can, carve time out just to read. Reading to me is therapeutic. It's just kind of like I'm reading. My brain is not thinking about my stuff. It's just start thinking about the character in the book or the topic of the book or whatever. But I highly recommend people to do a quiet space, because with email, and I hate email. If anybody in the audience wants to send me something or tell me something, don't email it to me, because it's too much. And I think it consumes you. You can go down a rabbit hole. The internet's the same way. You go to look for one thing, you click on one thing, you look up, 2 hours are gone. Social media is all consuming. So we're living in a very busy world. There's so much spinning around us that you have to parse through that and really step back to the simplicity of just quiet time with yourself and learning how to really sit still. Now, this is something I do mindfully do, is to sit still. If I'm in a meeting and I'm thinking about something that's happening on campus, or I'm thinking about something that's happening, I intentionally tell myself I need to sit still and be present, because that's still going to wait, because my phone is texting. Now, if it's something that's an emergency or on fire or something that's very timely, I can maneuver my way through that. But I do set my phone to that new thing. Well, it's not new, but it's new for me, where I can silence my notifications unless it's a certain person, like someone who I know I need. So not everybody needs to get me all the time.
You got husband, you got kids, like those are
I got people who need to get me, and they know not to. My children are grown, but they know, like if it's set to silent, they know, okay, unless something's on, like they're in a crisis, or they need to talk to me, and which is, thank God, rare. But or my chief operating officer, or people here on campus, if something happens, it'll tell me. But there are people that I know, if they reach out, it's something. So I don't have to be reached all the time. But as a leader, sometimes you feel like you do, and then you need to check yourself, because if something happened to me right now, Huston-Tillotson's 146 years old. I am a blip in its history. I'm not that important. I'm important, but I'm not that important. And that's All of us are that way. Um, Something happens, the place is going to just keep going. I replaced a 15-year president. He stopped on Tuesday, June 30th. I started on Wednesday, July 1st. Nothing happened. And he had been here 15 years. The students were still walking around with their backpacks. People were still complaining about stuff. The cafeteria was still open, and the grass was still cut. Nothing happened. And if you're a good leader, that is what happens.
That's what you want to happen as a
That's what
good
you want
leader.
to
You
happen.
want to set it up so that
That's
it can
what you want to happen.
continue even in
Right.
your absence.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, here at the Young Chamber, we have such a mix of emerging leaders and established leaders, definitely them in our audience today. For leaders who may be new to mindfulness, what are one or two simple practices you recommend that they can do now that will help them grow their capacity for this mindful leadership?
So one thing we already talked about, which is trust yourself, which is listening to your gut, your spirit discernment. What we said earlier about anything, whatever you call it, like learn to trust yourself. And then another thing is extending yourself grace. I can't emphasize that enough. So that when you are not mindful in something and you jump ahead or you make a mistake or you take a risk that doesn't pan out. Um, Something is to be learned from that, something big, and always keep focus on the fact that something wonderful is going to happen. That's life. Something wonderful is going to happen. It is going to be a struggle. It's going to take work. It's going to take requirement, but it's building a muscle. And mindful leadership is building a muscle. That's why it says that you have to intentionally be present. Intentional is building that muscle. So, and just, follow your instincts, extend yourself grace, and by being patient with yourself and forgiving of yourself and doing it repetitively and intentionally. So,
I love that.
and it's not really that hard. It's hard because we make it hard,
Mhm.
because we overthink it, and that's not what being mindful is. Overthinking.
Couldn't agree more. We also have people in our audience who are maybe more experienced leaders and managers or leading teams. They're entrepreneurs leading companies. What is something that you might recommend to them if they're looking to level up into practices of mindful leadership within their
Uh,
workplace?
so one thing I share with my more senior colleagues is, and this is something I've learned, is don't take yourself that seriously. It's not that serious. I wish, in hindsight, that I had not taken so many things so seriously. I gave myself unnecessary stress and anxiety by taking myself so seriously and what I'm doing so seriously. And there is a balance. You can you can you can swing the other way and you will not advance your career because no one else will take you seriously either. So there is a balance. There's a balance to strike, and when you're at that balance, because it gave me anxiety, it gave me stress. I took myself too seriously. So I would say, slow down. You don't have to solve all the world's problems. You don't have to eat the elephant all at one time. It is a progress. It is a journey, and it sounds corny, but it's not about the destination. It's about the journey. That sounds corny, but that is really true. I mean, realistic. I'm 64, so I'm like in the fourth quarter of my life, unless I live to be 110, 150. So realistically, I am living very purposefully, following my passion, being on my right assignment, living my life out loud, and pacing myself to be able to do the things that I really enjoy. And I wish that I had known that in the first, second, and well, I learned it in my third quarter. So in my first and my second quarter of my life, I would have been a very different, younger person.
Perfect. You're absolutely right. I think that it's that following your purpose that I think we're seeing right now with the great realization is what I like to
Right,
call it, instead of the great
right,
resignation.
right, right.
People really identifying what that means to them.
And what's
Before I,
important to them.
exactly, exactly. Before I open it up to audience questions, so if you're in the audience, definitely keep your questions top of mind. I think we'll have maybe even a chance for you to unmute and ask your question directly to Dr. Pierce Burnette. But before we jump into that, just one final prepared question. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the bottom line of mindful leadership. How have you seen it benefit you and your teams? Have you been able to track those benefits? Do you want to track those benefits? I know we live in business world, so what does that mean to you, and how do you know that it's all going well and that you're kind of using it appropriately and seeing benefits?
So you alluded to it earlier when we talked about KPIs and returns on investment. We push to have a data-driven decision making.
Mhm.
I love to emphasize that the data tells the story. So for us, it's metrics like our enrollment, our graduation rates, our retention rates, et cetera. And we serve a population that has have big lives. 70% of my students, or over 70% of my students, are Pell eligible. So they come to us with from low economic socio-low economic status, and they come to us with very big lives. So we can't stereotype about that because their socioeconomic status does not dictate who they are. So by practicing mindful leadership, we see progress in gaining fiscal stability for the campus and lifting our brand and morale on campus and engaging and recruiting our students, retaining our students, graduating students. We've seen an uptick. Now COVID was a punch in the belly, and we're now getting our stabilization back again. But it does always go down to the bottom line. I'm not unrealistic. I'm not Pollyanna about that. It's how you navigate to the bottom line. If you're a hard driver and don't have mindful leadership, you don't have compassion, you're not open minded, you may get to the bottom line, but you're not going to sustain it because your company is not going to be healthy, because the company is only as healthy as the culture of the company. You want to be able to hire people you're seen as someone that's impossible to work for, impossible to navigate with. So there is a return on the investment, and being a compassionate leader, people will want to follow you. People will want to lead with you. They will buy into your vision. They'll get excited about it. I'm so passionate about the mission, it becomes contagious. And I'm so hungry for us to do the right thing by my students that it becomes contagious. If I'm laid back and not really caring about it and exuding that, I don't care if I'm making widgets or graduating students. You got to have passion about the mission and have a set of core values, which is back to mindful leadership. That's what being present is exhibiting those core values and being present in those core values. If it's integrity, if it's honoring diversity, it's holding ourselves accountable, whatever the core value is, me being present is grounding myself in those core values.
I love that. Thank you. Um, I'd love to open it up to questions from the audience. Mel put it in the chat. You can raise your hand, and I will call on you to unmute. We also have some coming into the chat. So while I'm reading the chat, let's go ahead and go to Danny if you want to unmute and ask a question.
Hello, nice to meet you, ma'am. My name's Danny. Can you hear
Hi,
me okay?
Danny. Yes.
I've loved everything you said so much. I have like 2 pages of inspirational notes. Thank you so much for doing this. One of the things that stood out that I have a question on is when you're talking about a culture, building that culture with the small teams and making sure everyone feels heard and being mindful in that way, and having a meeting every week and all of that. It's so necessary. And I was wondering if you've ever had a time. One of the things I've struggled with too is um, when you're in that position, C-level or whatever, chief, whatever, president, and you have a colleague that's completely the opposite of a lot of the things that you just said, or doesn't value those things. How do you communicate with that person, or how do you work with them on a daily basis, or how do you get that relationship going?
And I think this is what I believe, this is my personal opinion, that one of the hardest things in leadership is having either a person that works with you or for you that you don't think is effective. You may like the person, you want them to figure it out, you want them to be better, you try all the strategies you can for you to be different, to be able to build a relationship with them, and it's just not working. So as a leader, and I'm a military wife, so forgive the military analogy if some people are like, I don't like the military analogy, but I'm a military wife, so forgive me. It's about the Navy, not the sailor. So when I make decisions for the sailor, individual sailor, like like one of my cabinet members or someone who works for me, a director or something, then I'm not helping the university. So I have what I call the three T's of leadership. I can train that person to say, there's some professional development that you need to have in order for you to be effective in your job. I can transfer that person. There's another space in the organization that I believe you will be a better fit for. And if training doesn't work, transferring is not an option, or it doesn't work, then the last T is terminate. As hard as that is for me as a leader, I have to make the decision for the Navy. And sometimes in my experience, people have been relieved to get to the terminate because it's not a fit. And my instincts are saying that, and their instincts are saying that, and we're trying to work it out. And it's just not helping. It's not helping. So those are my three T's. And and also, this is important to say, I say that up front with people. Like when they come onto my team, I tell them that this is my style. And as long as I'm the leader, and I've recently announced my retirement from the university, June 30th is my retirement. So I keep telling my people, the person who comes after me is going to have a whole different style. So you have to, either make a decision. You're going to adapt to the new style, or you're going to go find something else. You got to figure that out. But give the new person a chance so it doesn't disrupt the Navy. That's my message to them. So, but I think that's the hardest thing, because I have people who I really, like I had a vice president who I really loved her as a person, but she was super ineffective. And I tried everything I could to get her to be effective. And then I thought about moving her somewhere else in the university. And then I realized, I was like, this is not working. And I had to terminate her. And I really liked her as a person. That really bothered me. But she wasn't good for the Navy.
Thank you, and congratulations on your retirement.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Great question, Danny. I'm going to read Vicky's question in the chat poll, and then we'll come to you. So you're on deck. Vicky is asking, yes?
I'm retiring from the presidency. That's important to say, because I want to do something different and bigger.
Well, I can't wait to see what that is.
And my mentor told me, always leave the party when you're having fun. Like when you're at a championship or something, and the university's in such a great place now, it's time for me to know when my assignment is over, because it's best for the Navy, because I'm getting burned out in my space. So you have to know when to pass the baton for you as for the organization.
Amazing, I love that. Vicky asks, thanks so much for sharing today. She's curious if you could tell a little bit about someone in your life you consider to be another great leader like yourself. What did you learn from them, and how have you applied it to your own journey?
So I worked for a president at an institution. It's a turnaround story, actually. And I worked for him for 12 years. And he's a retired Marine. He was a Marine and an attorney. So, and all the stereotypes about being a Marine, and all the stereotypes of being, and he's from Brooklyn, New York. So all those stereotypes were true about him. So I'll go to the end and then come back. I called him after I was sitting in the seat as the president here at Huston-Tillotson and apologized to him, because I used to think the man was crazy. I used to talk about him behind his back to my other fellow cabinet members. But I didn't understand the pressures that you're under and why you make the decisions you make about terminating people. Like, he terminated someone. I was like, how could you terminate that person? But that person was terrible. So I learned so much from him, because his style was very different than my own. And at the time it felt uncomfortable for me, but I was learning from him. So, and I think it's healthy to work for someone who doesn't act like you, because you're growing yourself, and you got to relax in the fact that their style is different from my style, but I'm building my own toolkit. So I really look up to him. He retired. He retired, and he does other things now. And I still stay in touch with him when there's something that I'm not understanding. Like, I've gotten quiet and I'm still not hearing the solution. He'll point out to me that I'm not really quiet. He's like, "You're talking, like you're talking. You're not being quiet. You're not listening." He jars me sometimes. I feel like, you can't talk to me like that, but that's his style. And I've learned from his style to migrate it into my own self. And I pick the stuff I like, and I don't pick the stuff that I don't like. But I think it's healthy to work for someone who's very different leadership style, but respects you than you are. So that is someone I highly respect, and I see him as a mentor. I'm a strong believer in mentorship or sponsorship. That's the new buzzword for effective mentorship, and I'm very, very supportive of that.
Thank you for that. Cole, let's go on to your question.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alyssia, and good to see you, Dr. Chris Burnette.
Hi,
I have a
Colette.
question about how you decide when and where to be a leader. And you just touched on your retirement. You're about to go do some amazing things. And I'm stepping away from my current position to go off and pursue a master's of education.
Oh, good
Um,
for you.
Thank you. And I know I saw you last night at Great Conversations, and now you're here and you're putting in the work. How do you choose where you're putting in the work, what spaces to be a leader, and what spaces don't need your voice and your time?
Excellent question, and I've been asked that a lot recently as my time, my this part of my journey winds down. This chapter comes to a close. I was very selective about the boards that I joined, and I joined the boards that I was learning something that was going to help me be a better leader or develop skills that I didn't have. I was not a fundraiser when I started this job. And this is because I came from a public institution where fundraising was not, we did it, but not to stay open. Like fundraising is a big part of my job, and I was not a fundraiser when I started this job. So I was invited to join the Austin Community Foundation board. I selected to do that so I could understand philanthropy. So I'm serving on that board in my capacity, and I'm learning about how a large, well-run foundation works, and at the same time lending my voice to the Austin Community Foundation was being intentional about not being seen as a white, only servicing white people in Austin. They had a reputation of just funding like the white arts projects, and they were intentional to change that and not real sure how to do it. So you build a board and you hire people. And they have a phenomenal executive director, Mike Nellis. If anyone knows him, he's just a phenomenal person. So, and Mike was very intentional about it, and he asked me to join the board. So it was a reciprocal relationship. So I choose things that are reciprocal. I'm learning and I'm being appreciated at the same time. It was the same thing. And then I'm on Disco, which is a for-profit. It was my second corporate board. And I did that because I wanted to understand the dynamics of going public. And I wanted to understand the dynamics of building out a large scale entity, because I was corporate before my job, but I worked for corporations that were already established. Like I worked for Procter and Gamble. I didn't learn anything about going public from Procter and Gamble. So I didn't grow, and I wanted to understand the whole finance, economics, stocks, the whole thing. So when I was invited to join that board, I did. The Urban League, the Black Chamber, I have a lot of passion around their mission, and I wanted the university to be associated with what they're doing. So that's the board part of it. Now, as far as my community work in the community, I follow my passions. If I'm not passionate about it, I'm going to be in the way. And I don't want to be in the way. So I want to be helping to advance it. So if it's something that I'm not, like basket weaving, I'm going to use that as an example, I'm not interested in that. So if somebody asks me to do something like that or speak, even where I speak, like this organization, I have a lot of passion about young people and about the beauty. I draw great hope from organizations like this. So I'm going to pour in what I can, and I get back at the same time. So it's reciprocal. And that has always been my sustainable and reciprocal. Those are my two choices. And I've been asked to sit on some boards because I'm going to be the spook who sat by the door. That's a book. And that means that I'm the Black person that's going to be shown at the door that I'm in the team. Not because you are going to help my institution, not because you're going to help me build my brand. You just want the Black person. And I do not accept those kinds of invitations. And my spirit tells me that. I can tell from the way people talk to me that they really don't. They don't want me on the board for me, the person. They want the perception that they're diversifying. And you get that radar, you learn that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful. I see three more questions in the chat. We have 3 more minutes. We'll see what we can get through. Kate's asking, throughout your career or time in a significant leadership position, what would you say your most positive learned characteristic was? Self-grace, self-compassion, etc. More so, what has served you the most personally?
So I'll go real quick. Vulnerability. I used to, because I'm as a female, I didn't want to show vulnerability. And I had a bad hire here at the university who this person wrote terrible things about me that were not true and sent them to my board. And I was just, it was my second year and I was floored by that. I'd never seen such meanness because I terminated her. So I'd never seen such meanness about it. I've seen it happen to other people. I'd never seen it happen. It never happened to me at that depth of toxicity. So I was speaking to my team. I called them all together and I was trying to say to them, these things are not true. And I bust out crying. I got the ugly face cry where your face tremors and everything. And I had never done that ever. So I was embarrassed by it. But my team, first of all, they started admitting that the woman was crazy and I made a mistake hiring her. Why didn't they tell me? That's another whole conversation. But in that moment, I learned that they needed to see that I was human and hurt. And at that moment, I realized I can be vulnerable with people, that I too am human. I don't have to be, the iron fist all the time or the unflappable person. I could be human.
Thank you. Tamara is asking, you mentioned the quarters of life and a little on how you manage each phase. What is your recommendation path for each quarter to be a better leader? And since we have a time crunch, I'm going to say, let's go first quarter. What's your recommended path for first quarter?
So for those of you who have young children, education and exposure is so important. Like, that's why I was like celebrating getting the Masters of Education. Like, that's beautiful. Like, you have to continually pour into yourself and you have to continue to learn. Like, education is the great equalizer. It sets you up for more opportunities. So especially when you're younger, you have time to do that, as opposed to, I got my doctorate 55 years old. In hindsight, I probably should have kept going to school. So I've been and school is relative. It doesn't have to be a university. It could just be development. So consistently teaching yourself.
Thank you. Okay, last question, and then we'll close it out. Kristen's asking, as you talk about training, and if you have an employee who has great potential, how do you start to help them become more mindful in their sphere of influence?
First of all, you have to say, I need you to do this. Like, you have to be very clear about it. You can't dance around it. You can't hint at it. You have to say, these are the things. People feel like they're touchy-feely things and you can't measure them, but you can. You can say to someone, I need you to be more present, and then point out when they're not. You're not listening. You're not paying attention. Send them a chat in the Zoom and say, here, you're disengaged. Wherever their weaknesses are, continually point those things out, just in a conversation, and from a point of, I care about you and I want you to be successful, and this is what I suggest that you do. Not to say you're weak, these are flaws in your personality, you suck, these are what you have to do. There's a very different approach, and that's being mindful, the former.
Dr. Pierce Burnette, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing more about how we can all be more mindful leaders. As Danny said, I'm sure we all have pages of notes from today's conversation, and this is definitely an area of lifelong learning and continuously pouring into ourselves, like you mentioned, that we can all continuously do and cultivate as we grow as leaders.
Thank
To
you
our
very much.
attendees, yes, so excited to have you. To our attendees, thank you for spending your lunch hour with us. Keep an eye on the Austin Young Chamber website and our social channels for more information about upcoming webinars, virtual programs, and in-person events. I would be remiss if I did not highlight our next signature event, the 5th Annual Lead Summit, our full-day conference for young professionals, set for April 29th. Now is the time to gather teams, buy tickets, and get ready for a great day of in-person learning and networking. You'll be receiving more information on this in your follow-up email after today. Thanks again, Dr. Colette Pierce Burnette, and I hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.